Follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. That is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life, because no, when you identify what your passion is, you'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And some of that work's going to really suck. But passion in its root form comes from the word that means to suffer. Most people have lost sight of that. So when you find your passion, you identify a passion, it means the thing that you're willing to suffer for, because the outcome matters more than your temporary suffering. So when you lose sight of what that is, of why am I suffering? Why am I just cranking away at this? It's really easy to start drifting off course, because that through line is no longer connected. But once you identify that, you consistently pull yourself back to it.
Out of curiosity, how often do you travel?
It depends on time of year. So typically I'm doing 40 events plus a year. So that's 3 to 4 times a month typically. But it just depends. I mean, there are months where I'm gone. Like I did 9 events in 16 days earlier this year. So I was in all kinds of different cities in Puerto Rico, and then I had like a month where I had nothing. Right. So it just depends on, like there are months when events tend to happen, and they're like December tends to be pretty slow. I just got back from Dearborn, Michigan. I was with Ford, but like most of December is pretty empty for me from a travel standpoint. But that's when I get all the work done and have my meetings and do the whole thing, right? So it's
that's got to be nice, man. It's got to be good to kind of step back, especially in December, and take a little bit of a break.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
How do you keep yourself from burning out during that? I mean, 9 events in 16 days.
Yeah, that was really hard. I mean, I know it. Listen, there are people who do jobs that are like legitimately hard, like legitimately wearing on your body and your mind and your soul. So, for me to complain about like, oh, I had to get on stage 9 times and speak to people about something I love. I mean, it sounds silly. It wasn't the speaking part of it. It was that there is emotional labor that goes into that. So that is taxing from that standpoint. But from a really, it's more the travel. It was just the jet lag. It was just like, all of that is really the worst part of it. If I could just teleport, I would do it every day, But it's it's like the emotional and the anxiety of the travel piece of it. And am I going to get there? And there's like one flight from Puerto Rico, from San Juan, that would get me to Orlando for an event the next day. And like, if that flight doesn't go off, what's going to happen? So it's it's that kind of stuff. I know we talked already about the travel thing, but like that's kind of my that's the biggest stressor for me, is the travel piece of it more than anything. So
are you the guy that gets to the airport like 6 hours early just because?
Not 6, but I'm always there 2 hours early regardless, right? And then I'm like, listen, the worst case is I'll sit in the lounge for an extra half hour, right? Or whatever. But worst case, if I don't do that, is like there's traffic, or I can't find a parking spot for 20 minutes or whatever. So it just is, which always happens when I'm running behind. That's always when I can't find the parking spot.
Of course.
Reasons. Like God's teaching me a lesson. So
there you go. Surprise! This entire podcast, we're going to talk about traffic and travel. Okay, so no. All right, let's get into it, man. Again, I just want to say thank you for carving out time for me, for my audience. I know that's going to be an incredible conversation, and I've had the privilege of researching a lot of your work. Read Accidental Creative, incredible book, really transformative for me, as an entrepreneur. I was able to apply a lot of those principles into what I do every day. So just very grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. So if you're ready
as well. Thank you.
If you're ready, I'm ready, man.
I'm good.
Cool. Let's go. All right. So Todd, you've spent your entire career, right, helping people produce their best work under pressure. What is the biggest lie that high performers believe about creativity or productivity that actually holds them back?
So I would say there are a couple of things. I think the biggest lie when it comes to creativity is people think you're either creative or you're not. And the reality is creativity is problem solving. So if you have to solve problems every day for a living, using whatever's in your environment, then you're creative, period. So if you're a strategist, if you're a writer, if you're a designer, obviously, if you're any of these things, of course. But I mean, I'm talking about people who are like working with their hands, people who have to figure out, how do I make this work, right? That is an incredibly creative act. It's a different expression of creativity, but it's problem solving. And so you're prone to all the same pressures and problems that the typical creative people that we always think about, the artists, we conflate art with creativity. So we think that creativity means art. It's not. Creativity is problem solving. Strategy is creativity. So that's one thing. But I would say the other thing that often gets in the way of people, significantly gets in the way of people, is they forget what they do when they're actually working. They haven't defined what work really means for them. And what I mean by that is we do all of this activity all day long that we, at the end of the day, we've pushed a lot of things forward, or we've gotten through the work, but we haven't really done the work. And I think there's a big difference between doing the work and getting through the work. Getting through the work means, okay, I've got an end product that's fine. And, a lot of people are offloading the process to generative AI and other tools to help them get through the work to get to the end product. But what does it mean to actually do the work? And I think, so the question that I challenge people to ask is, what do you actually do when you're working? Or what do I actually do when I'm working? What am I actually being paid for? And if I'm being paid for something like generating ideas or developing strategy or figuring out a solution for the client, that should be where most of my time goes. And unfortunately, what I find is that for most people, they haven't defined what they actually do when they're working, what they're actually getting paid for. And even if they have, most of their time, energy, resources, assets, focus is not going to the thing that they actually are getting paid for. So I think that's the thing that holds most people back, is that lack of clarity, that lack of focus, and the lack of intentionality around actually putting your finite resources into the thing that you're actually being paid for.
As far as defining your work while you're doing it, I mean, what's the argument to, like, most people just gravitating back to their job description, right? This is the clear path of work that I need to do every day. How does that weigh against, like, what you're actually saying?
Well, it depends on how you measure what success looks like. So once you've defined the outcomes that you're actually being paid to generate, then you can start determining metrics to help you identify, am I actually making progress toward those outcomes? For a lot of people, a full 8-hour day of playing email ping pong, just batting responses back and forth to people and pushing work off on other people's plates, is what they consider work to be. But that's not really doing work. Now, yeah, do we sometimes have to have those communications in order to clarify who's doing all those things? Yeah, of course. But again, I feel like many people don't understand. So I'll give you the example from my life. There are 1,000 things I could fill my days with. I have, the part of the problem is that you build containers and then you have to fill those containers. This is the problem of being naturally wired to create and make value. I'm sure you struggle with the same thing. It's like, I'm going to do a thing. And then that becomes a thing you have to continue doing. There are 1,000 things. I have tons of people pulling for my time. I have to routinely at the beginning of every week ask myself, what are the outcomes that will make this week successful? Not what activities will I do, not what tasks will I check off, but what at the end of the week, when I look back, what defined outcomes will have made this a successful week, regardless of how many check boxes I tick off or whatever. And so I have to do that because I realize that I will easily lose myself in just filling little containers or responding to emails or helping people in whatever way I can, which I love to do, but ignore progress on the actual outcomes that matter to the future of my business. The things that actually help me grow my influence with my clients, or the things that actually help me refine my thinking. A big part of my job personally is thinking. I need to be crystal clear about what I think about certain issues. And yet unfortunately, when I get really busy, I spend a remarkably little amount of time just thinking. And so I've had to build disciplines into my life to ensure that I have that time set aside just to think, just to let thoughts marinate, just to ensure that I'm getting really clear on my thinking about something before I go out and I start, teaching others, principles based on research or whatever. So, so I think getting really clear on what are the defined outcomes, what are the outcomes you're being paid for. As a creative professional, you're not paid to do tasks. You're not paid for your time. You're paid for the value you create. So what is that value that you're being paid to create, and how are you structuring your time, your resources, your energy around generating that value is the question we have to be asking.
Hmm. Todd, at what point did you realize that creative success is more about identity and standards rather than talent or ideas? I think I got this from your book.
Yeah. So I think talent is really important. Talent is always going to be important, but talent gets you in the game. Practices keep you at the table. So I know a lot of talented people. I've worked with a lot of talented people who have a couple year run of incredible success, but because they're relying solely on their talent, they're shooting from the hip. They're not getting better. They've become known for a thing. They're protecting the thing they've become known for via their talent. And that's a really dangerous place to be, because the moment you become known for a thing, every instinct in you wants to just circle the wagons and protect that thing, and you stop growing. But practices, ingrained habits, are what allow us to continue to grow, to continue to take risks, to continue to adapt, to learn over the course of time. So talent is great, but I know a lot of people, I'm sure you've met many people as well, who have less talent, but they have more discipline in terms of how they apply that talent, where they apply that talent. And so as a result, part of the problem, part of the challenge of being talented, really talented, is a lot of options, right? And so a lot of talented people just kind of they apply a little bit of effort in a lot of places, as opposed to saying, no, I need to be really disciplined about where I apply this talent. So yeah, I think for me, that happened when I was a creative director. I was leading a lot of people, talented people, and I just noticed patterns among the people on my team, some of whom who had been in industry for a long time. They've been doing creative work for a long time. The ones who were able to sustain were the ones who had practices in their life to keep them inspired, to keep them focused, to help them really define their work, to understand what their outcomes were. They treated themselves like a professional. They regarded themselves as a professional. We all, I work with creative professionals, so we love the creative part of that. Yay, creative. We get to come up with ideas. We get to make things. We ignore the professional part of that, which means we're mercenaries. At the end of the day, we're being paid for an outcome. So we get to be creative, but we also have to embrace the professional side of it. I have a buddy who plays bass with a little artist. You may have heard of called Taylor Swift. So he's her touring bass player and was just on the Eras tour. And I did an interview with him when he first. We played music together back in the day. When he first got this job, this gig, he said somebody gave him 3 pieces of advice when he first got to Nashville. Like he's like, I was the big dog in Cincinnati. He's like, I was the best bass player in the city. He's like, but then I moved to Nashville, and it's like everybody here was the best whatever from wherever they came from, right? So it's like there are a lot of talented people here. He said, the guy said, listen, you got to be 3 things. You got to be a pro, you got to be a bro, and you got to be apropos. And he's like, what do you mean? He said, well, be a pro. The thing that separates brilliant, consistent players in this city who get gigs over and over again, they show up, they've got the music charted, they've got professional gear, they show up not on time, but they show up early, they're set up, and they're sitting there and they're ready to go when the moment comes, when the artist walks in the room or whatever, when the producer walks in, like they're ready to go. Like, be a pro, just be organized. Like if you're just baseline, if you can just be organized, like that puts you ahead of almost everybody else, right? Who just wants to play music or whatever. Be a bro, meaning, hey, listen, just be cool. Like be a person people want to be around. Just be easy to work with. Be the kind of person who's like, don't have an ego. Just be like, hey, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad. It's really nice to meet you. Like network with people, get to know people, and then be apropos, meaning understand that especially in certain kinds of industries, like the one that my friend Amos is in, like you're going to be in situations all the time where you're in the room with like a super famous person, and you're like, I always wanted to meet that person. It's like, listen, just be appropriate. Just be in those moments, recognize, like, act like you've been there before, be appropriate, right? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to meet people, but just like be a professional in that moment, like
Yeah.
be appropriate. So he's like, and that was great advice for me because it helped me as my career grew and as I got better and better opportunities. Like, I just learned, like, be a pro, be a bro, be apropos, show up in those moments as the person that you know the other person would want you to be in that moment. And I mean, he gets more work than he could possibly imagine. He's obviously was on the biggest tour of all time, but it's just kind of cool to hear that kind of advice coming in an industry that typically isn't thought of in that way. You know, and I think about this all the time. I mean, my wife is an interior designer, and so she works with a ton of contractors and a ton of people in that space. And like, she's kind of got to the point where she's like, there are a handful of people I want to work with because they show up, they're organized, they clearly communicate, they price fairly. You never have to question, like, you know, I mean, they charge what they're worth, but they also price fairly, where it's like, you know, I know that they're charging what they need to keep their business professional, right, in the way that they operate. And I see that also in the creative services industry all the time, where it's like you've got people who they just act like they don't have it together, and it just makes you like, I don't know, I don't think I want to work with them, right? They might be
Yeah.
cheap, but there's a reason that they're cheap, you know. So yeah, so that would be my I guess that would be my advice, is like, your practices are where they're going to keep you in the game over time. Your talent will get you there, but your practices keep you in the game.
Oh man, I love that, and there's a lot there. So I've got a couple follow up questions to that. So I think that there's, and maybe not questions, just observations. I feel like there's this dichotomy, you know, between creativity and professionalism. Like, you can't be one, or you have to be one or the other, right? You can't be both, which is kind of what you're breaking down the barrier between, right? Is like, in order to be properly creative, you have to have this professional side to you. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, well, not necessarily in order to be creative, but to make a living, in order to
Okay.
continue to
Okay.
sustain a career. Yeah, absolutely, and to sustain it over a long period of time. So,
Got it.
I've now written 7 books. I could have been a guy who wrote a book once upon a time, but the reason that I've written 7 books is because I have a discipline in my life of writing. Every single day I show up and I write 500 words. And nobody sits down to write a book. You sit down to write, you don't even sit down to write a chapter. You sit down to write like sections of a book. And I don't like writing. I hate writing, as a matter of fact. It's one of my least favorite things to do, but I love having written. I don't love the process, but I love the outcome at the end of the process, because it's one of the unique ways that I can have the most influence on others is by putting my thoughts in writing. So, you know, in that's an example of, you know, if I wasn't sitting down and writing every single day, putting, you know, going clickety clack on the keyboard, I would have far fewer books than I have right now. But it's the discipline of sitting down every day, and not every day is productive. Sometimes I write crap, but it doesn't matter. The point is to do the writing. The point is to, you know, to do whatever Stephen Pressfield says, do the work, right? Sit down. The difference between a pro and an amateur is a pro works whether they feel like it or not. W. Somerset Maugham said, he was asked once, do you write only when you're inspired, or do you have a regular rhythm? He said, well, I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, that happens every single morning at 9 a.m., right? Which means, you know, he sits down to write and he finds inspiration in the midst of his writing. So we just have to do the work. We have to have the discipline and recognize that sometimes the work's going to be terrible, but we have to just sit down and do the work, apply our craft.
That's great. And so now on the topic of work, right? And this is going to be my category where I fall into. I've been that guy that just does the work almost too disciplined sometimes, right? Because I make promises to myself that I have to keep no matter what. And sometimes, as you're, you know, building businesses, I'm sure you've been there, you know, and lots of people, you know, kind of in the same boat. When the work becomes too much, this is kind of what I want to talk about, right?
Yeah.
You've written and you've said, people don't burn out; they drift, which really drew me in when I heard that. So, what are the earliest signs, Todd, that you see when someone's losing intentionality just before everything starts to break down?
There's a concept I call dissonance. I share this often when I'm working with leadership teams. Dissonance is a gap between the why and the what of your work. It's when you know what you're supposed to do. You've got all your tasks, excuse me, your objectives. You have all of that. All of it is mapped out for you, but you've lost sight of the through line. You've lost sight of why the work matters in the first place. So you might be making a lot of progress, and just by sheer will, I mean, you and I are, I just from what I know of you, we're both pretty disciplined guys. Like we tend to, whatever needs doing, we do it whether we feel like it or not, which is great. It's a great attribute to have. And it's easy for us sometimes to lose sight of the through line. Why am I doing this? Am I doing it just to do it? And so the first sign typically of any individual who's starting to drift is that they lose touch with why the work matters. They lose that sense of what I call productive passion. Passion, and you've probably heard people say, follow your passion. My daughter is in college, and she told me that she heard somebody say, follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm just like, that is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. Because no, when you identify what your passion is, you'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And some of that work's going to really suck. But passion in its root form comes from the word that means to suffer. Most people have lost sight of that. So when you find your passion, you identify a passion, it means the thing that you're willing to suffer for because the outcome matters more than your temporary suffering. So when you lose sight of what that is, of why am I suffering? Why am I just cranking away at this? Why, it's really easy to start drifting off course because there's that through line is no longer connected. But when you identify that, you consistently pull yourself back to it. It makes it easier to focus. So Jim Collins in his great book, How the Mighty Fall, one of my favorite books, by the way. People talk about Good to Great, Great by Choice, Built to Last. My favorite book is How the Mighty Fall, because it talks about how once great organizations go into decline. And he said, the first sign of many great organizations declining is that they understand what works, but they have no idea why it works. So you've got people copying tactics that were applied by people who came before them, but they don't understand the strategy that led to those tactics. They've become decoupled from the why of the organization and what we're doing to try to solve these problems. So they're just photocopies of photocopies of photocopies of tactics. And pretty soon, people are just like, why are we doing this? So when the circumstances change, like right now, we're in a time of incredible uncertainty. When the circumstances change, they can't adapt the tactics because they don't understand the strategy that led to the tactics to begin with. This is how we begin to drift. It's like we create something, we create a container, we start filling it, we fill it. We've got the discipline, we're filling the container, but we forget why the container was created to begin with. And so over time, we're doing a lot of work, but we're basically going in circles. And that's in my experience, that's when it's easy to start drifting.
It's really interesting. I really like the way that you were talking about passion, and so candidly, like I have this book over here that I published in 2019, and I hit on this topic exactly, right? That there's this balance between passion and practicality. And you have to you've got to find you got to find the balance in it, right? You have to find what you can actually do to make a living and how that feeds your passion, right? And so it's interesting to hear that, because I think I've only heard it a handful of times now where people kind of go against that statement of, follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life, and I'm a big advocate that depending on how you look at things, through what lens, passion can be found in things that, you're not topically passionate about. Like, listen, I built a business on fixing, restaurant equipment. I'm not passionate about fryers and ovens and stoves, but I'm passionate about the 1,000 thank yous that I get at the end of the day. I'm passionate about helping a small business get up and running and feed more families for the weekend, so right. I just that's more for my audience, I guess, is to just, when you talk about passion, there's all these buzzwords and there's all these different things floating around social media. Just, take a step back, widen the lens a little bit, and truly understand what your passions are in what you're doing. And that, Todd, is one of the things that's helped me get unstuck, from doing too much. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I think that's important, like to say, listen, I am passionate about thrilling and delighting clients. Like I love that, right? Or I'm passionate about creating a lifestyle for my employees where they can have families and send their kids to school or whatever and have, like I want to create security and stability for my employees. I mean, those are very uh, not only valid, but I think like admirable, productive passions, right? When it's not about
Yeah.
you, it's not just about, listen, we all love to make money and it's great to make money. Money, profit is what allows you to pursue some of these other passions and purposes. You have to have profit or it all falls apart. But at the end of the day, you can always kind of tell when somebody's really only doing something because of
Hmm.
the dollar signs at the end of it versus there's an outcome I'm pursuing and the profit is a byproduct of this outcome that I'm pursuing. And when you get really good at pursuing that outcome, it's funny how money tends to follow passion. But like you said, not because you're interested in the topic, but because you're pursuing something with everything you got. You're willing to suffer for it. That's when things get really exciting.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I know we're bumping up towards the bottom of the hour here, and I want to be respectful of your time. You got time for two more questions?
I do. I do.
Awesome. All right. So, first off, what is a truth about producing meaningful work, Todd, that took you years to fully understand or accept, but changed everything once you did?
I think that I think that the thing that really unlocked all of it for me was the understanding of intended audience. Um, Most people think that their work is for themselves, right? Your work is not for yourself. Your work is for other people. Your body of work is not about you. It's about other people. And I think that I once heard Austin Kleon say, people want to be the noun, but they don't want to do the verb, right? And I think Austin is incredibly astute when he says that because I think a lot of people want the aura of doing something because of the way it makes them feel, but they don't want to do the verb of actually doing that thing so that they can serve other people. So for me, the biggest unlock for me was understanding who am I doing this work for? So I'll give you an example. A lot of people talk about avatars. They talk about psychographic groups, demographic groups. This is how we, sort of define who we're trying to reach. I don't do any of that. I think of one specific person. When I'm writing a book, every single one of my books, I could tell you the names of the people. I'm not going to do it. I could tell you the names of the people. I wrote every one of my books to one person, and it was a different person for each book. The reason is I want my books to feel like I'm sitting across the table communicating something to you. I picked the one person who I thought if I could change this person's life in some way, what would I say to them? And that's how I write all of my books. And that unlocked a lot for me because it helped me understand that it's not about what I prefer. It's not about making myself look clever. It's not about trying to come up with the fanciest way to say something it's about just ensuring that I'm communicating with that one person. The funny thing is, people often say to me, um, how did you write the accidental creative? I feel like you have a camera on the wall of our office. Like you've been, the more precise you get in terms of how you communicate, the more it's likely to resonate with people outside of that person you're doing the work for. So if you're creating marketing, if you're trying to develop a business strategy, you're trying to figure out any of those things, I recommend like don't think about what group of people would like this. Think about one person, think about Bob, your neighbor Bob. If we could thrill and delight Bob, what would that look like? What would Bob want? How would we talk about this to Bob, right? That's my advice. That's really the thing that I think unlocked my ability to get my work across in a way that connects with others.
That's fantastic, and I would challenge my audience to apply that to whatever it is that's in front of you, whatever it is that you're doing, whether that's your work with marketing, if you're um, writing a script for a meeting, whatever it may be. That is
Mhm.
such good advice to hone in on. All right, Todd. Last question for you, and then I'll let you go. What is a question that you wish more people would ask you, and how would you answer it?
Um, I think a question I wish people would ask me more often is, what do I do when I get bored? What do you do when you get bored with your work? Most people have this illusion that if you're doing work that you feel is being called out of you, it's going to be this never ending stream of excitement, enthusiasm, mental stimulus. You're always going to be on fire. No, I mean, I'll be honest. There are moments in my life where I get really bored. Like I think about kind of like the Rolling Stones, right? Like think about the Rolling Stones. How many freaking times have they played Satisfaction in their life? Or think about Paul McCartney, who's still out touring. How many times has he played Let It Be in concert, right? I'm probably countless. Like I don't even know if he would even be able to estimate how many times he's played that song in his life. Um, I went to see Billy Joel a couple of years ago in the stadium, and Billy Joel said at the very beginning, he's like, "Well, we don't have anything new for you. It's the same old sh, it's like same old stuff." He didn't say stuff, but there's something to that, to showing up and playing the hits. Um, but i but i feel that way about giving talks from my books. I've given the Accidental Creative talk thousands of times at this point, and it's like, you have to find ways of making it feel fresh for yourself. You have to find new ways of making the work resonate with you. Because if it's not resonating with you, it's not going to resonate with other people. And so if you're bored with your business, if you're bored with your operation, you're bored, whatever, don't just go in and blow things up, because a lot of people, when they get bored, they just want change for the sake of change. No, be purposeful, but recognize that, like, if you're bored, then if you're a bored leader, people aren't going to want to follow you. So what is it going to take for you to refresh it in such a way that it will resonate again with you in a new way? So for me, like my talks, I've just rebuilt my Accidental Creative talk. And the reason is I've given it thousands of times. And I realized, like, I'm actually kind of bored giving this talk. Like, I do it. Nobody knows that. Like, I've done it so many times. But if doesn't feel fresh to me, it's not going to feel fresh to them. If it doesn't feel like it's a little on edge for me, like, wow, this might not work, then I'm not going to have the same heightened, sense of imminent doom that will lead me to have the urgency when I deliver the talk. So you have to keep yourself engaged. It's your responsibility as a leader, as a creative professional, to ensure that you stay engaged and fresh in your work, and that you don't, back to the board thing, you don't drift off course. So pay attention to those moments when you feel bored with your work, and ask yourself, what can I do to refresh this to keep me engaged and keep me moving forward?
Thank you for that, Todd. All right, quick hitter today, man. Where can people find you?
ToddHenry.com, ToddHenry.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I know how busy you are, how productive you are, but I appreciate it, and I know my audience does too.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for the great work that you do.
All right. Thanks, Todd.